So continuing these videos, we are going to be creating just a simple contact form, get some information from the user using different types of fields. In the last video, we went ahead and we added the submit button and a label and first name field to our form. I'm going to continue this. We're going to just add line breaks for now after every one of our elements. And I'm going to copy and paste, reuse some of our elements that we have. So now here, I'm going to create the last name field. And we're going to still use type equals text because we're getting just some plain text in there. It can be kind of difficult to try to narrow down what somebody's name might be, especially these days. It's really hard to tell. You could narrow it down to not allow numbers, things like that, using the patterns that we're going to look at later on. But for now, we're just going to leave it as text. So then looking at some more of the properties that we can use for our elements. First, we have the type for the input element. We have an ID that we can use. Here, the ID should be the same as what we have in the for attribute of the label tag. We have a name. That name is going to be what is used when the data gets sent. So this would send something like lname equals whatever the value of that field is. There are some other elements or attributes that we can add in here, like required. And it is my understanding that for supporting older browsers, you would want to have required equals required. That's redundant, but older browsers seem to like that a little bit better. Newer browsers, you can get away with just having the word required in there. So for the sake of making sure this is going to be supported on older browsers, I'm going to leave the required attribute in there. And then, of course, we have our submit button down here. So saving this, loading it up in the browser, refreshing it. You can see we have our first name, our last name field. We do have last name set to required. So when we hit submit, the browser by default has a little bit of checking going on, and it's telling us, please put something in that field in order to submit this. It doesn't matter what that is, and then that will submit. So then going back to our HTML, we can see this is requiring that field, something to be put into that field in order for the form to submit. If that field is empty, then it's not going to let it be submitted. Another type of field that I want to look at real quick is the number field. So label for, we'll say age, or equals age, age, input, type equals number. ID equals the same thing that we have in that label for attribute, and name equals, I'm going to keep using a lot of the same ones for these. That's just my style. You can have that name and ID be different if you want to. Just remember that the ID needs to match what is in the for label, or the for attribute of the label, and the name is what the data is going to be sent as. So now when I save this and we open it up in the browser, we refresh this, we have the age field. And with that age field being a number field, we have these arrows next to it so that we can increase that. It defaults to increasing the step by 1. or we can just type in whatever number we want because we don't have any minimum or maximum set right now. So now going back to our HTML, we can add in some things into this age, or this input element, like the minimum value that we want it to allow. So for, say this is anything on the internet, you need to be at least 13 years old. So min could be 13, and we wouldn't really need a max. I'm going to set the max at 150. I don't know anybody that's 150 years old, so that'll work for my purposes here. And we can add in a step value or attribute, and then we can have that step at different intervals, whether we want it to step by 1, 2, 10, whatever, then we can have it do that. If we want to have this step by half years or even quarter years, we can. So we can put in 0.25 for the step, save that. Now we have a minimum of 13, a maximum of 150, and we have it stepping at 0.25. So when I refresh this, we have a maximum age. So this is only going to go up to whatever that maximum age is. And it's going to go up in quarters. So 18.25, 18.5, 0.75, 19, and so on. We can still type this in. So maybe I'm 39 and a third. So 39.33, and I want to put that in. Try to submit it. It's telling me I need to fill out this field. Then try to submit it again, and it's telling me that I need to enter a valid value, and it's giving me the closest values to what I entered, 39.25 and 39.5. Because I have that step in there, it's making sure that the numbers that get entered have to be in quarters. So if you're going to do something like that, you would want to give the user some kind of indication of doing that. And we can do that by adding in something into the label. So we could add, in 0.25 increments if we wanted. Or we can add a title into this field if we want, and have that say the same thing. So age in 0.25 increments. Save this, and then when we load this up in the browser, we refresh this again. We can have this as part of the label, or when we hover over this, you can kind of see that age in 0.25 increments there coming up, because that's the title that we have on that element. Those are just some of the things that we can do. If we're going to limit what the user can put in, then we need to be able to tell them, what they have, what they're not allowed to have. Since we have the maximum at 150, I put in 149 here. So using the step, it's going to go up to that, and then it's not going to pass 150 unless I were to manually type that in. If I type in 151, have my name in here, try to submit this, it's going to tell me that it needs to be less than or equal to 150. Just like if I try to put 12 in here and submit it, it's going to tell me that it needs to be greater than or equal to 13. So you need to be aware of that when you're setting those min and max, that if they put in something else, it's not going to let them submit the data. One more thing that I want to look at real quick is in these text fields or the number fields, any of these input fields like that, we can add in a placeholder. So here, placeholder equals, we'll say John, and then in the last name, I'm going to put a placeholder equals Smith, and inside of my number field, I'm going to add a placeholder equals 30 or 27.5. Save that, and then when I load this back up in the browser, we have these placeholders here. As soon as I click into that field and start typing, it's going to make that placeholder disappear. It's just something that's there for the user to have an idea of what they can put in there. You do need to be mindful that as soon as they start typing, that's going to go away. So if it's something that is a little bit more complex, you may want to put it somewhere else. But for the sake of this form, it's fairly simple. We can do it that way. It's not a problem. They can see, okay, well, this can be at least 30 or 27.5, and it's going to take it. And when I click submit, it did take it. If I try to click submit here, it's telling me these aren't filled out. These values aren't default values. They're just placeholders to give the user an idea of what they can enter and what you're expecting to come in from that field. And in my next video, we're going to take a look at some more input type fields that we can use and